excited that you're willing to take your time to join us. So we want to be efficient with your time this evening, but also provide you with the most information that we reasonably can. We're going to try and go for no more than an hour here. So buckle up your seatbelts and join us as we talk about period poverty and menstrual health. On the way to doing this, just as people hop on and folks begin to get comfortable, I'm going to give us a poll, and I'd love for you guys to take the poll. And so we want to help all of us collectively understand and demystify myths about menstrual health and period poverty. And so a way to understand these issues is to understand, when do we teach them? And so traditionally, menstrual health and anything related to periods is taught in sex ed. So I want to ask, and I'm launching a poll here. We'll give ourselves about maybe 2 minutes max to see what people think. You know, when do you believe menstrual health is taught throughout the states? Is it more than 75% in about 39 states? Do all 50 states teach menstrual health education through sex ed? Only about 50% of the states, so therefore about 25, or do less than 25% of states, which is, you know, roughly 12 states, engage in sex ed that's mandated? That's the catch, I'm sorry, where sex ed is mandated in the curriculum for schools. So we'll give you guys a couple minutes here just to answer this question. What's your guess? Do you think that 75% of states mandate sex ed, about 50 states, all of the 50 states, or 12 states, and that 25%? Like, just what do you think? Go ahead and take a guess. So basically, most of us believe that less than 25% of the states, which would be around 12, actually engage in mandated sex ed in our schools. The truth is, at this time, it's actually more than 75%, about 75%, a little over, 39 states engage in mandated sex ed in our schools. And so I think it's very important, as we have conversations like we are today, for us to understand what is being taught, and is what is being taught conducive for autonomy and empowerment for men, but of course women's bodies and people who identify as having a uterus, or understanding the nature that this reproductive system has. So we're really excited that you guys are willing to join us and have this conversation today. And let's go ahead and get into it. So as we go to our next slide, we want to take a moment to tell you guys a little bit about the Women's Fund of Greater Chattanooga. The Women's Fund of Greater Chattanooga emphasizes making life better for every Tennessean woman and girl. So we want to make sure that all the women, all the girls, everyone who is within those ecosystems has what they need to be supportive and productive. And so as a result, talking about menstrual health and women's health is important. So today we are joined by some amazing folks. As we go to our next slide here, you'll see who we're talking with today. We are so blessed to be joined by Bettina Hunt. Bettina Hunt is the Miss Tennessee Corporate America representative today. She also is the president at You First Community Foundation, and cares very much in making sure period poverty is uplifted, and getting rid of it is taken action by all of our corporate America and people in between. We also have Rachel Endo, who is a health educator with A Step Ahead, specifically A Step Ahead Chattanooga. Rachel has given so much of her time learning about, and therefore educating folks on a myriad of health issues, including women's health. And so we're grateful for her. We also have Cherish Mallory Brown. Cherish is not with us today in person, but Cherish has taken the time to contribute, which you'll find later. She is the CEO of a local organization called Flow and Flourish that helps people understand menstruation all the way through menopause. And then we have our sister chapter, Patria Johnson, who is giving the support of the entire Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis. We're so grateful to have Memphis join us. Memphis has been a sister chapter to us, in that we are part of something called the Tennessee Women's Fund Alliance. And therefore, we have 4 women's funds within Tennessee in Nashville, Knoxville, Memphis, and Chattanooga. And so we are able to then come together, much like now, to have Memphis and Chattanooga partner to provide this information for you. So without further ado, we just want to get into some of the weeds. So today we're going to be talking in 2 buckets. So we have period poverty and we have menstrual health. And so we want to talk about both. As we kick off talking about period poverty, it's so important to help us understand that policy impacts poverty. And so working with the Women's Fund of Greater Chattanooga, some of you know this, some of you this might be new to, but in the 112th General Assembly, which is essentially last year and the year before, the Women's Fund of Greater Chattanooga was able to pass a bill, SB 974 and HB 640, which essentially said, since entities donate period products and could be found liable, we don't want that anymore. So we want to make sure that individuals are able to donate and have the opportunity to not have any kind of liability. And so we were able to introduce this and get it passed. And what it does is literally allow people to donate products. We worked with the National Alliance for Period Products and the National Diaper Bank to make this happen. And we found out about this through COVID as we were distributing, or supporting the distribution of school lunches, because our state did that during COVID for students who were no longer in physical classrooms. We found that they needed menstrual health products. And so as a result, we realized folks wouldn't donate them because of the liability that they had. And so as a result, this law became written and introduced, and it's been very successful. It's allowing us to do things that we do now today. So we wanted to highlight that for you and help us understand that as we collectively raise our voice, it allows us to also understand how policy impacts poverty. But I want to turn the time over to some of our presenters. I'm going to go ahead and start with Bettina. And if we can go to the next slide, just thank you so much for your time and tell us a little bit about your take on period poverty.
Hi, hello everyone. Just so appreciative to be here today. And so today I'm just going to talk a little bit about period poverty, what it is, and also how and what it looks like here in the state of Tennessee, and what we're able to do to help eradicate and fight against it. So first, period poverty is the lack or inadequate access or funds that menstruators or women and girls have to be able to purchase menstrual products or access to be able to get to it. So that is period poverty. It is the lack of funds or access to be able to get their menstrual products. And what does it look like here in the state of Tennessee? And so I have a fact sheet because, we like numbers and data to go by, but in Tennessee, 1 in 5 women and girls between the ages of 12 and 44 live below the federal poverty line. Now, there are over 1,447,000 women, 730 women and girls between the ages of 12 and 44 who live in the state of Tennessee. And of course, as I said, 1 in 5 live below the federal poverty line. Of those women, 280,000 of those, almost 60% of those families that live in poverty experience financial distress and struggle to keep up with their bills and cover unexpected expenses. Women between the age of 19 and 64 that are covered by Medicaid is about 348,000 of those 1,400,000 women. And if you think about Medicaid, it provides financial protection for healthcare needs. Individuals still struggle to have access for material basic necessities that require them to thrive. Even women, about 40,000 of those women participate in the WIC program. And of that, WIC provides nutrition food for those women. However, those living below 185% of the federal poverty line face challenges meeting those basic necessities. Now, if you think about the women and children who are below the poverty line, I gave you the numbers that are on WIC, Medicaid, or just a financial distress, and they have to think about medicine and food, how much more would they have issues with or trouble getting their menstrual hygiene, which is not covered on the it is not covered on the any federal program, right? It is a necessity. Menstrual cycles does not take vacations. It does not take a break. It continues to come even when we're not feeling well. And so, what can we do to help fight against this? One thing is platforms like this. We can continue to talk about it. It's a taboo subject. There's stigma that's behind it that makes girls and young ladies feel ashamed, feel bashful. It affects their self-esteem because it is known to as a hush subject. No, we don't talk about that. But no, we do need to talk about it. It is a part of life. It is beautiful. And what many don't understand is that menstrual health affects our reproductive health. And so with that, what can we do? We can make sure that we continue to have the period poverty drives, continue to collect, continue to donate, continue to support those who are in the fight to help reduce and to eradicate period poverty. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you so much. So grateful for your time and for all that you're sharing. We're going to keep going and talk a little bit about menstrual health, and we'll ask everyone to hold their questions until the end. We see you. We want to just give people space and time to present, and then we'll definitely hold space for your questions at the end. But again, thank you so much, Bettina. It looks like folks have some thoughts based on what you've shared, and it's important to keep all of that in mind. So let's go ahead and talk about menstrual health. Again, Cherish is not with us today. We really wish she was, but she's provided for us a video. So if you just take a moment to hear what she's going to share with us, we'd be really grateful for that.
Hi, my name's Cherish, and I am the owner and founder of Flow and Flourish, and we specialize in womb and vaginal health. So I'm working with some great questions today. The first one is, what is a myth about menstrual health that you'd like to dispel? So we're often told with our menstruation and our cycles that they are expected to be difficult. That if we're having heavy bleeds, severe cramping, really large mood swings throughout the month, that these are all expected within your cycle and expected to be difficult. But that is not true. You can have a better experience with your menstrual cycle. So our cycle is a lot like our fifth vital sign. It's telling us a lot about what's going on with our bodies. So when we're experiencing different difficulties within our cycles, like really heavy cramping, a lot of PMS symptoms that come up before your bleed, things like that, that we're really not given too many solutions and kind of told just to deal with it. But when you really start to look deeper into that, a lot of those things are coming up because there are difficulties going on within the body. That can be things like, quite often, issues with hormone imbalances. It could also be nutrients deficiencies, stress level, lack of sleep. There's a lot of different things that play into that. And with looking at and observing your menstrual cycle, you can start to get a larger picture of what may be going on in your health. I know that for me, when I first started tracking my cycle, which was looking at things like, obviously, what days I was bleeding and how long, but also other things you can track are things like basal body temperature and your cervical mucus. That is something that ebbs and flows throughout the month depending on where you're at in your cycle. And when I first started tracking, I found that I was actually lacking in vitamin D. Based off of my observations of my cervical mucus. And sure enough, I went to my doctor and found out I was lacking in vitamin D. So it's a really interesting way that we can see what's going on in our body when we connect more with our cycle, and we can begin to self-advocate for ourselves. And when we do that, we can begin to heal. So we can have a cycle that looks something closer to 2 to 5 days of bleeding, a cycle that's a length of anywhere from 25 to 38 days, and anything that's a light to moderate blood flow when you're bleeding. Outside of that, there may be some issues going on, and working with your body to reduce your PMS and your cramping and things like that are absolutely possible. Myself and many other women I've worked with have been able to do this, to reduce their cramping almost to nothing, and to have much easier bleeds and a much better experience in relation to your menstrual cycle. So the next question I have is, how can we shift our understanding and perspective to be able to view our periods more positively? So this is something I'm really passionate about. I love speaking on this portion. One of the things I like to introduce people to and teach them about is the 4 phases of the cycle. So women or female body people run on a cycle that is an average of 28 days. Now your cycle starts from the first day of your bleed and ends with the day right before your next bleed. An average is 28 days. Your cycle, a healthy cycle, can look like anywhere from 25 to 38 days in length, whereas male bodies run on a 24-hour cycle. So male bodies and our society is set up for that 24-hour cycle, but that is not how we work. So we have 4 phases. The first phase being your menstrual phase, and that's the time of your bleed. The next phase you enter into is going to be your follicular phase. After that, we have your ovulatory phase. And then finally, we have the luteal phase. So what happens during this time is your hormones are shifting and doing different things throughout the month as you're going through these different phases. And so that can look like so many different things. That can mean that maybe at one time during the month, you feel really excited, you feel really social, you feel like you could take on the world, that you have all this energy, and that's probably gonna line up somewhere around your ovulatory phase because of what your estrogen is doing at that time. Another time that you may find that you feel more withdrawn, that you want to spend more time alone, that you're a lot more self-reflective, that your body is asking for more rest, and this may be somewhere in your luteal phase. So as we go throughout the month and when we begin to learn about these phases, we can begin to have a lot more grace for ourselves. We do not run on a 24-hour cycle, and it is extremely hard for us women to show up the same every single day. And so when you learn more about the phases of the cycle, you can then begin to harness those different things. You can start to implement different things into your life while you're knowing what phase of your cycle you are currently in. So it's a really wonderful tool so that you can start to learn to work with yourself, that you can start to see the positive aspects of your cycle and the ways that you can harness those different energies. So it's really powerful stuff. I love to talk about the 4 phases of the cycle. So one of the #1 questions I get asked in regards to menstrual health is, do I recommend tampons? While tampons are definitely a very convenient option, and even if you're using the high quality, organic, unbleached kind, they're still very absorbent because they're made of cotton. So what this can do is it can wick away your natural moisture and lubrication as well. This can cause irritation to the vaginal canal as well as the cervix, and can lead to potential micro tears and introduction of bacteria into that area. Something that I always recommend when someone comes to me with any slew of menstrual health issues, step #1 is absolutely always, what products are you using? I'm always going to recommend that the first thing that you do when you're starting to dive into your menstrual health issues and to work on things is to get away from tampons. And that can look like using menstrual cups, menstrual discs, as well as pads or reusable cloth pads, which would give you less chemicals and things like that as well. So I've noticed my own personal journey, and with a lot of people that I've worked with, when they make the switch away from tampons, they often notice significantly reduced cramping, lighter bleeds, and potentially even bleeding for less days. This is something that has made a big difference for a lot of people that I've seen. And so step one for me is always to recommend that people switch away from using tampons. And there's so many interesting products on the market now. Menstrual cups come in so many different shapes and sizes because we all have really unique anatomy. So if you try one and it doesn't seem like quite the right fit, I encourage you to continue to try to see if there's something else. But also there's things like period underwear on the market right now. I've been testing a lot of those. Those are wonderful products. So there's some really cool alternatives out there now available for use. So yeah, that's one of the number one questions I get asked, and I do recommend switching away from those. Thank you so much for having me today. It was a pleasure to be able to talk about these things. I'm very passionate about menstrual health and about getting the word out and about talking about period poverty. You can find more information about what I do at theflowandflourish.com or on Instagram and Facebook at theflowandflourish. I host a quarterly free menstrual education workshop where attendees will receive a free menstrual cup. And we go over how to use them and all of the different period products on the market right now. Thank you so much for having me.
We're so grateful for her passion and her encouragement of women, and what she does and how she's turned this into a career and a job so that we all can have, her invested time. So really grateful for that. We want to turn the time back over to Bettina. This time again, we're talking menstrual health. And as Cherish began to share, there are some things that we should consider that start to get close to our bodies. And so Bettina has some things to share about that.
Hi, yes. So one of the questions is in doing menstrual health education is that we always talk about the different harmful effects of certain sanitary products. And what is PFAS? So of course there is a medical term, and you all know how we really mess up medical terms, but I'm going to give it a shot just so that you will know what it is. The P stands for per and poly. The F is fluorinated alkyl substances. And so really what it is that there are over 4,700 chemicals that comprises of the PFAS. It is a group of widely used man-made chemicals that accumulate over time in our bodies and in the environment. And as you see here, it says more, according to the United States EPA, it has high levels of exposure to these chemicals that may lead to adverse health outcomes, which could be health problems such as liver damage, thyroid diseases, obesity, most definitely because we're talking about women's health, fertility issues and how it can affect the reproductive system as well as some cancers. People sometimes call these the forever chemical because it does not break down. It takes a very long time before it breaks down and is very, very slow. So you can go to the EPA.gov for more information in regards to the PFAS. And so in the other part we're going to talk about is how to choose healthy menstrual products. And so one of the things in what I do is in my feminine hygiene tours, I do a demonstration that's really shows the breakdown of many of the store-bought. That's why you have to be very careful when we're doing our period poverty drives, that we're not buying problems that will potentially over years, because a lot of these PFAS chemicals, it stays in our bodies for 7 to 11 years, and it caused those problems that I had spoke of. which result in reproductive issues as well as other harmful body issues. So when you're looking and checking your product, you always want to make sure that it's sealed. Here I have two separate products, just real quick. And when you look at it, when you see one that is open and exposed, because of the research that I've done and the information that I know, it's an indicator that there are chemicals in here. Why? Because chemicals need ventilation. It needs to breathe, versus you have sanitary napkins that are not open, that are not exposed to anything that can go in our most feminine area. So always be careful and do your research. You know, when we know more, we do better, right? You always want to look at if it says that it's more absorbent, the chemicals, colors inside our sanitary napkins. We want to make sure that we're watched and we're looking and paying attention to what's on the inside of our sanitary napkins. Looking at the blue field, if you pour water on it and you drip it in a cup, your water will be blue, which is a chemical. So you have to check and wonder, why is there blue chemicals falling from your sanitary napkin in your most feminine area? And those is one of the ways that how the chemicals get back in our system. So we have to be very careful and making sure that there are not any harmful effects. We have to do our research and not just use what people give us, and understand that your body is precious, and reproducing and just having a healthy lifestyle. So thank you, Joanne.
Very informative. I know that this was the first time I had heard anything of that sort, and thinking about the fact that I've been around the sun a few times, right? To know I'm finally hearing about this. So thank you so much for sharing that. We want to turn our time over now to Rachel, who's going to give us a presentation in a slightly different vein, but still important.
So again, my name is Rachel Endo, and I'm a health educator with A Step Ahead Chattanooga. So we primarily serve Southeast Tennessee, a little bit of North Georgia, and a little bit of North Alabama. But if you live outside of the Chattanooga area, there are A Step Ahead affiliates throughout the state. So just Google A Step Ahead Chattanooga and then whatever area you live in, and you should be able to find an affiliate of A Step Ahead. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about menstruation and contraception. Just due to limited time, it will just kind of be an overview, so kind of a 1,000-foot view of menstruation and contraception, but hopefully just providing some good information so that you can move forward with just a little bit more. So just starting with some menstrual cycle basics. The menstrual cycle is the hormonal cycle that a person with a uterus's body goes through in order to prepare for pregnancy. If an individual does not get pregnant, so they don't have an egg that's fertilized, implant into their uterine lining, the uterine lining gets shed, and that's called a period, menstruation, or menses. So a lot of times when people hear menstrual cycle, they just think of the period, but the period is just a few days of this entire cycle. So this cycle begins on the first day of a person's period and then ends on the first day of the next period. The average menstrual cycle is about 28 days, but there can be some variance. About 21 to 38 is considered an okay range. If a person's having a cycle that's 20 days or less, 40 days or more, that would be something to talk to a provider about, just because there shouldn't be that much variance in your menstrual cycle if you're not on any kind of hormonal birth control. So as we're talking about the menstrual cycle, I feel like it's really good just to touch on the anatomy real quick, because if I'm saying uterus and you aren't familiar with where a uterus is or what it looks like, it can kind of be confusing. So you'll see these slides are numbered. Number 3 is the uterus. So the uterus is where the fetus can grow if an egg does implant and a pregnancy happens. So the uterine lining is what gets prepared every cycle to maintain a pregnancy. About once a cycle, a person releases an egg, and this release of eggs is called ovulation. And the eggs come from the ovaries, which are the little yellow things on each side labeled number 1. So people with a uterus are born with the number of eggs that they have. And again, they'll release usually about 1 per menstrual cycle. That egg will stay in the fallopian tubes for about 24 hours and then travel down into the uterus to try to implant. So again, ovulation is when a person is most fertile, when they're most likely to get pregnant. So again, ovulation is just when the egg gets released from the ovary and travels into the fallopian tube where it waits to get fertilized by a sperm. For most people, ovulation occurs around day 14 of their menstrual cycle. So if you are tracking your cycle, you should be able to count back from your last day and figure out when exactly you typically ovulate. But again, for most people, it's around day 14, so about halfway through your cycle. The egg will stay alive in the fallopian tubes for about 12 to 24 hours, and then sperm can live in the uterus for 3 to 5 days. So even though a person may release their egg on day 14, if they had sexual activity on day 10, they still potentially could get pregnant. So again, if you're trying to either avoid a pregnancy or cause a pregnancy, it can be a really good idea to be tracking your cycle just to be aware of when ovulation occurs. So this, it typically has a little calendar that goes, so I'm sorry for just the image, but I'll just kind of talk through what it does. But you'll see at the bottom, there's a little day tracker. So day 1 of your cycle, again, is when the period starts. So most people will have a period for about 3 to 5 days. If a person has a period that's longer than 7 days regularly, that's something to talk to a doctor about, because periods should not be super long. And kind of like what Cherish said earlier, periods should not be super, super painful. They shouldn't be super heavy. They shouldn't be something that is miserable for a person. If a period is really long, really unpleasant, a person should talk to a provider, because that could be a sign that something else is going on with the body. So again, the ovaries are where the eggs are stored. So on around day 14, the egg travels down into the fallopian tubes. If that egg is fertilized and doesn't implant or is not fertilized, it'll break down. There's a lot of hormonal changes that happen, and then the lining gets shed and the person has a period and the cycle kind of starts over. So contraception is basically just a fancy word for birth control. And birth control is a device, medication, procedure, or behavior that a person does which prevents pregnancy. There are hormonal methods, non-hormonal methods, surgical methods, barrier methods, and abstinence, which are effective at preventing pregnancy. It's important to note, too, that there can be benefits or uses to contraceptives aside from just pregnancy prevention. For people who do have really, really painful or really heavy periods, hormonal birth control can be a great option to help regulate their menstrual cycle and make it more manageable and less painful. Also, for some people, hormonal birth control methods can reduce PMS symptoms. And again, they can help manage endometriosis, PCOS, and other conditions like that. So a person does not have to be sexually active in order to be on birth control. So this is just a quick overview of most of the birth control methods that are available currently. On the top row, we have methods that are considered more effective, but we think it's important to note that any method of birth control can be effective. Just these at the top tend to eliminate human error. And if a human's in charge of it, there is a little bit more potential for things to go wrong. So that on the top line, we have the implant, which goes in the arm, the hormonal IUD, which goes in the uterus. Both of these methods work by stopping the release of the egg. So again, if the body is not releasing an egg, then there's no way for a person to get pregnant, because that egg has to be present and be fertilized. We have the non-hormonal IUD, which that works by being wrapped in copper, and copper naturally causes an inflammatory response in the uterus. And this inflammatory response is toxic to sperm, so sperm will not go anywhere close to the egg. So that's how that method is effective. Tubal ligations and vasectomies are surgical methods of birth control. These are where you completely sever the way for eggs to get out or the way for sperm to get out of the body. So again, if we don't have sperm that can get to an egg, there's no way for there to be a pregnancy. On the second row, we have the methods that people typically have a little bit more control over. And honestly, a lot of people are a little bit more familiar with these methods. The shot, you have to go into the doctor every 3 months to get an injection. The pills you take at the same time every day. Most people have 3 weeks of active pills and then a week of inactive pills in which they'll have a withdrawal bleed. It is considered safe for a person to just start a new active pack of pills, though, and skip that inactive week. With the ring, you put the ring into your vagina for 3 weeks, and then you take it out to have that bleed. Again, if you want to skip it, that is considered safe. And then the patch works similarly in that you put one on for a week, then take it off and put a new one on for those 3 week periods too. On the bottom row are methods that are typically not considered as effective birth control, just because, again, human error is a wonderful thing that we have. But these can be effective methods if people use them perfectly every time. So those would be fertility awareness, which is just tracking your cycle, monitoring your temperature, monitoring your mucus, things like that, just to make sure that you know where your body is in your cycle. There's the pull-out method. There's spermicides, which is a fluid that goes inside the vagina to prevent sperm from getting into the uterus. And then finally, there are condoms, which are a barrier method, and they work to keep sperm from coming in contact with the egg as well. So there are several birth control methods that can have an impact on a person's period. So this top row is methods of hormonal birth control that cause a period to become light, irregular, or cause the person to have no period at all. So with a hormonal IUD, most people will experience a really, really light period or just some periodic spotting. Several people who have hormonal IUDs, they experience no period at all. And the same thing is true for implants and the shot. So if a person has really painful or really uncomfortable periods, this could be a great option for them if they want to not have to worry about a period at all. Some people, if they do get on these methods, they do still experience heavy bleeding. And so if that is the case, that'd be something to talk to a medical provider about, because there are some additional options that a provider could recommend. And the next row are methods that cause light or regular periods. So birth control pills, the birth control patch, and the birth control ring will all give a person a regular period that's typically really, really light. A lot of people who are on one of these methods may experience like just a really, really light period that's 2 to 3 days as opposed to the 3 to 5 days. And then finally, on the bottom, we have the normal to heavier periods, which falls into the non-hormonal IUD. For most people, in the first 3 to 6 months, their period may be a little bit heavier just as the body adjusts to the non-hormonal IUD being in there, that reaction of the copper and the uterine fluids. But then after a few months, the period typically goes back to normal for most people. So on the flip side of that, when we're talking about menstruation and birth control methods, most non-hormonal birth control methods do not impact the menstrual cycle. So here we have listed several methods that don't cause an impact. Of course, abstinence does not impact the menstrual cycle. And again, fertility awareness is just tracking your own cycle. That won't impact your menstruation, how frequently you have it, things like that. Condoms can be a great method to still provide pregnancy prevention. And because they are a barrier, they provide STI prevention as well. And they don't impact the menstrual cycle. Phexxi is a relatively new product. It is a vaginal gel that goes inside the vagina prior to sex. And because it just lasts for about an hour, it's considered effective birth control if used correctly. But again, it does not impact the menstrual cycle. Spermicides, diaphragms, cervical caps, and sponges also tend to work together, and they don't impact the menstrual cycle. So if you are interested in birth control, but you don't want a product that's hormonal that could impact the hormones in your own natural cycle, then there are still plenty of options available for you to prevent pregnancy. And then the last one on this slide are vasectomies and tubal ligations. So with vasectomies, the person with a penis still produces sperm the exact same way. There's just no way for the sperm to get out. For people who get tubals and they have a uterus, the body can still release an egg. There's just no way for it to get into the uterus. So that's how it is effective. So people who have a tubal, they still have a period. The body still goes through a hormonal cycle where an egg is released. But again, there's no way for them to get pregnant. So that's how those are still effective methods of birth control that don't impact your period. Next slide, please. So some quick misconceptions about contraception. One is that hormonal birth control damages fertility. A lot of people have concerns that if they get a hormonal birth control method, they'll never be able to have children. But for most people, again, there are outliers in everything, but for most people, when a hormonal birth control is stopped or removed, depending on if it's an implant or pills, whatever it may be, most people return to whatever is regular for them fertility within 3 months. It is considered safe to stop taking a birth control method and to have your body just resume a regular fertility. After a few months without any hormonal birth control, your body will start to ovulate again. Everything will start to go back to whatever was normal for it before. Another thought is that it's harmful to skip your period while on birth control. But again, that's really considered safe. Most hormonal birth control methods work by causing your body to not ovulate. So because there's no egg being released anyway, there's no harm to your body in skipping that period if you want to. A lot of people think that you have to be sexually active to use birth control. But again, there can be benefits to hormonal birth control, even if you aren't sexually active. So again, just really trying to destigmatize that some people are abstinent and use it for other reasons. Just, maybe it's managing their period, maybe it's managing hormonal acne, but there are other reasons that people could want to be on birth control. Another thought that we hear is that your body needs a break from birth control periodically. But the data that we have shows that birth control is safe to use continuously. Again, it's just halting ovulation, and we don't have data that shows that that causes harm to the body long term. And the last misconception that we hear a lot is that people have concerns with birth control causing weight gain. And again, there's not a lot of data that suggests that birth control causes weight gain. The one exception to that is the shot. The shot is one method that has been noted to potentially cause weight gain for some individuals. But most other methods don't cause weight gain. That's more than just like a typical weight gain for people as they get older. It's estimated that on average, people gain about 1 pound to 2 pounds a year. And so any weight gain on birth control, with the exception of the shot, tends to be about normal with that trend. And so just a little bit about A Step Ahead Chattanooga quickly. Again, if you don't live in the Chattanooga area, there are A Step Ahead affiliates throughout the state. I think there's just like 11 counties in the state of Tennessee that aren't covered by an A Step Ahead. So currently we cover the implant, hormonal IUDs, non-hormonal IUDs, and birth control pills. When we say we cover these methods, that means that individuals can get them for free. We cover the insertion of the implants and IUDs. We can also do removals and replacements. And if a person needs a pap smear, we can cover a pap smear as well. For IUDs and implants, a person does have to go into a clinic, but for birth control pills, we provide those via a telehealth visit with our partnership with 28 Health. So this is just a quick picture of our service area. Again, if you're outside of this area, there is probably a Step Ahead in the state of Tennessee that does serve you. But if you're in these counties, you can feel free to call us if you need help with any birth control methods. Again, this is just our phone number. So if you have any questions about getting free birth control, if you have questions about other birth control methods, anything like that, we are more than happy to help you. We have a team of 5 educators who are always happy to answer any questions that a person may have to find the method that's best for them, or if they just have questions about their menstrual cycle, things like that. Yeah, that's all that I have for you all today.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Very helpful. I'm really grateful for all of the input folks have given. It's been a variety of input, and each piece of input has been needed. And I know that all of us as women have needs, and we have different needs at different times. And so it's important to be able to go places to get the information that is pertinent to our season of life. As we get ready to wrap up here, I want to turn the time over to Patria Johnson. Again, we are part of a statewide network of women's funds / foundations. And so Patria, as our sister women's fund, is going to go ahead and lead us in some questions and answers and some wrap up. So I'll just turn over the time to you, Patria, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanna, for bringing us in this wonderful space. I do want to thank the other panelists, Rachel and Fatina and Charlene, for participating in this very much wonderful and much needed topic to discuss. And I was sharing with Joanna, the term period poverty was kind of new to me. I'm like, okay, I want to know more about that. But I will speak from the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis, is that we are really concerned about the health and well-being of women and girls. And poverty reduction is our thing. And so poverty takes on many formats. It's not so much always about dollars and cents and things that you have. Sometimes the lack of knowledge and understanding is a part of poverty. And so today I can say that I feel enriched and richer today, having participated in this webinar, and I've learned more. I'm like, oh, okay, I remember a little bit about this. I know a little bit more. So I hope that each of you who have participated today, share with me that you have been enriched and that you have learned a great deal, and that you have that you will not hold this just to yourselves, that you will share it with others. And so having said that, I would like to know if you did learn anything. We have a little poll that we want to have you complete to just give us a sense of if you learned something and how it benefited you. So if we'll give you a few minutes to answer the questions in the poll. Did you learn something new today? Any new information? Also, we have this poll, but if you have any questions, remaining questions that you'd like to have answered, you can put those in the chat. So if you'll let us know if you have questions. We have the panelists here. They will graciously help us answer those questions, and we'll do our best to address those questions. But I'm really grateful that we had this time, and as part of the Tennessee Women's Fund Alliance, joined here in Memphis with Chattanooga, Knoxville, and Nashville. We're all doing various things in our individual communities to address period poverty. And one of the ways that the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis has addressed this is that we, particularly during the pandemic, we did a number of mobile food pantries in our community. And we wanted to be intentional that, yes, we're giving food, but household items and sanitary products were things that we did disseminate to reduce poverty in this area. And I often think about those that we serve in marginalized communities who have limited access to financial resources. Period products are not cheap, they're expensive. So it's something that we want to be conscious that as our families are trying to stretch dollars, that this is something when we can have donated items and provide those tangible resources for poverty, period poverty and menstrual health and awareness, we want to do so. So I'm looking in the chat. Let's hear your questions. Oh, the poll is in. All right. It looks like 93% of you said yes. You learned something new, and a small percentage said no. So wow, that I'm impressed by the no, because that's telling me that okay, we're amongst an educated group of individuals who stay abreast of things. So I always take the positive side of something that may appear to be negative, but I'm loving the 93%. So that is speaking to the wealth of knowledge and information that was shared on today. And so I do thank our panelists for sharing the wealth of their knowledge and experiences with us. So the time is getting away, but we have a few more minutes if there are burning questions. Put your questions in the chat. We still have a few more minutes. Well, this is something that we don't have a poll for this, Joanna, but this is something that I hope that we can do again next year, that we'll be able to come back again for Period Poverty Awareness Week and do something of this magnitude again. Okay, someone has their hand up. Okay. Joanna, do you? Okay, this is the question. It says, is this being recorded to share, or will this presentation be sent out? I see Joanna is saying yes. Yes, this is being recorded and we can share this out with participants.
Yes. We'll have a post-event package that we'll send out to you all And we'll also put on the websites of the panelists here if they would like, as well as, of course, the Women's Fund for Greater Chattanooga. Our YouTube page will also have it. We might take a minute to edit it, but we'll definitely make sure you guys have the link for that.
Okay. We have another question. This is from Yolanda Joseph. I'm just loving these are my Memphis ladies, y'all. She said, this is Yolanda. Hi, Yolanda. She says, I have a question about menopause. Is there a particular age in which it starts? Okay, that's a real good question, Yolanda. All right. So does anyone want to chime in on that? I've heard that it is a process that could take over 10 years, that it's just not you one. The average age I've heard for menopause to occur is 52. Okay, I'm not gonna do any disclosure here. Y'all can see by my grimace here. Yeah.
Ms. Johnson, may I respond to that question?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is actually menopause can actually start at the age of 40. That goes through the age of 50, through the age of 60. However, it does, you may start seeing different signs once you get into your 40s, late 40s, but it actually doesn't hit until you've actually had a 12 months of no cycle, that you're officially in the menopause zone. However, there are things that happen that could start as early as 40 years old that will signify that you're heading towards it.
Back to that, I've heard about the 10-year range, so it could start in your 40s. Did you say it could go on to 60? Did I hear you say that? Oh, Lord.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Because depending on the makeup of one's body, you could start in your 40s, but then also you could start the process in your 50s that doesn't hit until you're 60.
This is a topic. Yeah, we might need a separate one on menopause. It's a topic that I'm trying to learn more about, and my body is doing crazy things, but I won't divulge too much. But yes, good question, Yolanda. That's a season of life that I'm nearing and participating in right now. Let's see. Question, are there any advantages to using is that pessary? Does anyone of the panelists have response to that?
I am unable to answer as well, but I can definitely tell you what it is. Thanks to technology, you can always look up something really quick. So pessary is a soft, flexible device that is placed in the vagina to help support the bladder, vagina, uterus, and or rectum. So for those who didn't know what that is, it's a prosthetic device that's inserted for a structural and a pharmaceutical purpose.
If I can jump in there, forgive me, I'm new to that term, but based on what Bettina is saying, are you referring to menstrual cups? Because I believe Cherish is someone we can put you in contact with who's described the use of menstrual cups, which is something that is inserted for the sake of a purpose, right? So if that's what you're referring to, yeah, we'd love to put you in contact with Flow and Flourish. And you can also reach out based on the information that's in this screen.
Okay, it looks like I see no more questions in the chat, and okay, I spoke too soon. Should we say this is our last question since we're at time that we'll address? We discussed the menstrual items not to use. What do you recommend that we use? So that's the question. We've been told what not to use, but what should we use for menstrual items?
I think there are a plethora of options. We've had the cup and the disc mentioned, period panties. And of course, there are tampons and pads. Cherish mentioned some issues that may come up for some people with tampons. But I think ultimately with menstrual products, it's just finding what works best for you. We could sit here all day and say the cup is the best method, but if the cup is miserable for you and you cannot get it to work, that's not going to be the best period management product for you. So I think ultimately, again, just figuring out what works best for your body and knowing that it's okay to try other things. And if they don't work, it's okay if they don't work for you. So yeah, just trying to like really alleviate the pressure of like a right and a wrong with period management.
And just to piggyback off Rachel was saying, which I agree, is that you do have to try and make sure that what you're using does work for you. One thing that I truly do advocate for is making sure that the product that you use allow you to flow. Because you have to remember that your menstrual flow is supposed to flow out, and that you're not using things such as, tampons or other things that may keep it from flowing. However, because when it's not flowing, you have to remember that your body is cleansing itself when it doesn't, when the egg is not fertilized. So you have to allow the toxins from the body and everything to cleanse itself to flow out.
And then I'll just add my 2 cents in there. As was mentioned, as we make sure what's good for us is also in style and shape, it should also be in terms of chemicals. And so I just encourage everyone to go to the EPA and to do your own research on PFAS, PFAS, and the chemical to know what is it and how does that impact you, and what does that do to your body.
All righty. We're at time. We have one more. There's another question here. Yes, I think this is a simple 30-second. Do you suggest not using tampons when you're swimming?
I think while you're swimming can be a great time to try out the disc or the cup. Both of those go inside the vagina. They work slightly differently, but again, both of them are inside the vagina, but they still allow that free flow. So those could be good options for while you're swimming, and those last for 12 hours on average. So it can be, a little bit longer period management than a tampon might be for swimming.
Okay. All righty. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, participants, for your questions. And this has been great. I'll turn it back over to Joanna.
Well, that's it. We're so grateful for you all. You will see a email from us as a follow-up, and we just hope that you guys continue to do everything you can to get rid of poverty in every way. And in this case, for this week, to ameliorate and get rid of period poverty around you and stay educated. So thank you so much for your time. And from all of us to you, have a good evening. Take care.